Good evening, fellow heretics. Welcome to a special episode of Nerds and Heresy. We're back from we're taking a hiatus from our hiatus because there's a special something I wanted to react to, and we'll get to in a minute. But first, a couple of very special guests waiting backstage. One of the few guests that we've had on the show that I've had the pleasure of meeting in person, Arden Hart and Dr. Ben. And before we bring them in, let's watch that intro.
Hold on to your butts.
All right, welcome. Thank you guys for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm super excited. Don't get to do as much of the atheist stuff nowadays, so it's fun to kind of like merge the two worlds, you know?
Yeah, y'all do so many call-in shows all the time. Y'all are killing it.
Oh my god, it feels like it never ends. And it doesn't really, but you know.
See, I already did a shot before coming here because I was telling Captain Dadpool that not only do we have transphobia today, but we have Frank Turek and transphobia. I can't speak anymore because I've had alcohol, but we're good.
I'm Arden Hart. So you can find me. There's links below, I'm pretty sure. At the Arden Hart on pretty much everything, but more importantly, Ben and I host the Transatlantic Call-In show over on The Line. That's every Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central. We have an open call-in show where anyone can call in to ask any and all of their questions that they have about trans rights. So we are, I mean, not that anyone is an expert on trans rights issues, but we tend to do this sort of thing all the time. So we're a little experienced, you could say.
You probably know more about it than straight white guys like Frank Turek and Sean McDowell, right?
Maybe a little bit. Just a tad.
That's why you're here.
Hell yeah.
Dr. Ben, what about you? What you got going on?
Yeah, so I'm not doing as much online at the moment because I'm a family medicine resident physician, and it's very busy doing the doctoring thing. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm in clinic like all the time right now, so I have a bit more time on the weekends. But throughout the year, it's going to get very, very busy depending on where I'm at. So you can mostly find me on the Transatlantic Call-In show or on Talk Heathen. My own channel's not doing as much right now because I'm just so busy. But I'm hoping to get back on some more shows here soon, but it just depends on the time frame. So really excited to be here tonight and with Arden.
Hell yeah.
I feel like I haven't done a show with Arden in a while just because we've been so busy, but
I know. I mean, like, I feel like one of the last things we really did together was the talk we gave. Maybe we've been on once or twice since then, but
yeah.
No, it's been a little bit since we tag teamed. So let's go. I'm so ready for it.
Well, good. I'm glad y'all are happy to be here. Thank you very much for coming on. I watched this because I made a TikTok earlier promoting the show, and I was like, sometimes I feel like I need to be punished for something, so I'll watch one of Sean's shows. And this is the one I watched, and I was just like, oh my god. I was like, I need some help responding to this because it was just so fucking dumb. So yeah, thank you guys for agreeing to come on. By the way, links to everyone's stuff is in the description below. Hello to everybody in the chat. I forget to do that. I did not put links to the Line or the Transatlantic Call-In show. I should have done that. My apologies.
Nah, that's fine. Just type The Line into your YouTube search bar. It will come up.
Yeah, it's not rocket surgery. Y'all are smart people. You'll figure it out. Okay. All right, so we have this stream from the show. I have some timestamps that we're going to go through because it's an hour and 15 minutes, so obviously we're not going to get to watch the whole thing. But we're going to start. Our first segment is going to be our longest. It's almost 3 minutes. And all the ones after this will be much shorter. But if either one of you want to jump in the middle of this, feel free, and I'll pause it and you can react.
Okay.
But yeah, here we go. Let me know how the volume goes. Oh, wait. Okay, sorry. Just got a text from Nat. She said she's not going to be able to make it. She's watching, though. Love you, Nat. It's all good. All right, y'all ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Let's do it.
Absolutely. The folks that gave us same-sex
volume okay?
marriage are not the LGBT community. the folks that gave us same-sex marriage from the beginning was the heterosexual community. Why? Because, and the church, because we bought into the romance view of marriage, the sentimental view of marriage, that marriage is just about feelings. And if I lose my feelings, I therefore have the right to find somebody else where I do have these romantic feelings for, I do have these romantic feelings for this person, because they think love is all about feelings. And the government is just here to recognize that I love someone of the opposite sex. But in reality, that's not the real purpose the government's involved in marriage at all. I mean, why should the government care that you love Stephanie or I love my Stephanie? We both have wives named Stephanie, right? Why should the government care that we have this romantic affinity for these people? It shouldn't. The reason the government should be involved in marriage and has been involved in marriage is because marriage between a man and a woman perpetuates and stabilizes society. That's why the government's interested in it. Okay?
Wait, hold on.
The problem is when heterosexuals have
Hold
decided
on.
that marriage.
I feel
really
like we
isn't
need to
about-
address that point specifically. But what, like, it not because, you know, the government being involved in marriage helps, like, merge finances or settle things like if you were to get a divorce, who's getting what, and figure out child custody things. Like, no, none of that's the reason. It's definitely because marriage stabilizes society.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a load of bullshit that he has no evidence for. But I think I do actually kind of agree with him on one point that I'm not sure that well, okay, well, let me rephrase that. He was kind of almost hinting at the notion that like the government maybe shouldn't recognize marriage. In which case I would actually kind of agree. Like I feel like it's more of a personal proclamation than it ought to be, or you know, maybe a sort of contractual thing. But then he kind of took it away from that and was like, no, actually, it is really important that the government gets involved, but only because we're stabilizing society with our PIV marriages, you know.
I just read about what marriages are stabilizing society. The 50% that end in divorce,
Right.
the ones that end in alimony and child support and fatherless children or motherless children. Like what marriage, how are these marriages helping society really? It seems like they're more of a burden than anything.
I would like to see if there's any stats on divorces and the religious affiliation of people going through those divorces. To see if there's like any, is it, you know, atheists and secular
50-50,
people?
But I'd have to.
Oh, really?
Check. Yeah.
I figured that's probably something that exists already, but
I remember like
haven't seen it.
back in my church going days, that was something that would like get mentioned from time to time, is like divorce in the church is just as prevalent as divorce in secular society. So we're doing something wrong here, y'all. It's something I remember being said often. But
You've given these women's too many damn freedoms.
All right, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Out children. It's all about the romantic feelings of adults. And then we can have no fault divorce because these feelings have evaporated. Then the rest of the culture goes, well, if marriage is all about feelings, if marriage is all about romantic affinity, then why not two men or two women? If it has nothing to do with children, what's the point? And you know, they're right. If there is no real covenant view of marriage.
I think it's also important to notice he's saying, you know, if marriage is nothing about children, then gay people can be involved. But I'm pretty sure all the data supports that. Sure, two-parent households are important, but that it doesn't matter what gender those parents are within the household. So the notion that like gay LGBT marriages have nothing to do with raising children is just also not tied to reality. That's just, you know, they don't reproduce, or, you know, according to him, which I'm sure there are plenty of LGBT marriages that are where the partners are capable of reproduction, but like, it's just not true. So
yeah, my thought too is like if that's the case, like if marriage is about the children, then like are people like heterosexual couples that get married, are they not valid marriages without children?
I think a lot of people in this field might argue that, like, at least even if you can't, like, the purpose, that is what the purpose is for, you know, or something along those lines.
He actually gets into that later.
Okay. We're jumping the gun. Sorry, we're getting too excited.
it's gonna happen. It's a lot of this stuff has like overlapping. So yeah, it's gonna happen.
Sure.
So we got like a minute left of this clip.
Marriage that involves the procreation and upbringing of children. Now, we do understand some marriages who are heterosexual don't bring forth children, but they're still modeling a generally procreative relationship, and they still tend to keep the man off the street from impregnating.
So those exceptions are allowed, but other exceptions that I don't like are not allowed.
Also, what does he mean by procreative? Like they're relatively procreative? Is that what he said? Like that doesn't make sense. You either procreate or you don't. There's no relative procreation. Like,
well, the last statement that he was just about to say just sounds like awful. Can we like go back a couple seconds and let him say this next phrase? Because I'm scared, but I think I heard something bad.
If there is no real covenant view of marriage that involves the procreation and upbringing of children. Now, we do understand some marriages who are heterosexual don't bring forth children, but they're still modeling a generally procreative relationship, and they still tend to keep the man off the street from impregnating other women out of wedlock.
So basically he thinks that marriage prevents men from impregnating women
just people on the street
married to.
Everyone knows before marriage we had this problem where men would go just impregnating random people on the streets.
Yeah.
And then that whole issue apparently just went away after. Once you get married, you're no longer wanting to sexually assault people.
Right.
Like what?
And not even just assault. Like you're married. That means you no longer have a desire to sleep with other women and potentially impregnate them. Like, what about the adultery that happens in however many marriages? And many of them end up with a child.
Yeah. And there's tons of adult, married, consensual, ethical, non-monogamous partners who go out and have lots of relations that could end up that way. This is something I struggle with, and I'm sure that we're going to see a lot throughout tonight in this whole video, that conservative Christians and anti-trans people they really struggle with definitions, where they will create a definition and give it what they think are solid boundaries that you can point to countless exceptions to those solid boundaries, but they won't acknowledge that that is an exception to the rule and that therefore their definition is flawed. Usually, I don't know Frank Turek, maybe he would, but I have a thinking suspicion that that's probably not the case.
Yeah, Frank Turek's pretty well known for sticking to a very narrow view of his arguments and ignoring all the outliers or exceptions. Anyway.
Yeah.
Frank's gonna Frank.
He's involved in a marriage, even a sterile marriage. So there is value to a man and a woman coming together for society, even if they don't procreate. But the only way to actually bring forth the next generation is through a man-woman relationship. And so that's the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with. And the problem is heterosexuals bought into this idea, this romantic view of marriage, this feelings view of marriage.
Here we go.
And it just made logical sense. Well, why not two men? Why not two women? And pretty soon the two is going to go away, Sean, because the reason that it's two, as you know, is for procreation and bringing forth the family. Yep. And once that's gone, why not three? Why not four? Why not? Well, the whole thing's blown up then. And it started with us. By the way,
that's fair.
Where did no-fault divorce start?
I think it was California, Reagan, right?
Reagan. Yeah, Reagan was the guy that did it. He later regretted it. But it spread across the country.
All right.
I'm pretty sure that yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that his Bible supports one man and multiple women in a marriage. So your own Bible says that 3 or 4 is okay as long as it's one man and the rest are women. And
King Solomon had 1,000 wives and like 2,000.
Right. So why is that okay, but it's not okay now?
He had like 400 wives and 800 concubines or something like that. Like, just ignoring the entirety, like you're ignoring 3/4 of your own Bible by saying that shit. You know?
Yeah, I also think this is it's not necessarily related specifically to trans issues, but I think it's important for people who are watching, just generally speaking, if you are a member of the United States, a citizen of the United States, and you like to vote in your local elections, the whole regretting no-fault divorce thing is really catching on in conservative culture. So not only do they want to remove women's right to access, abortion as healthcare, they are on the next phase, which is removing the ability for women to get divorced with no fault, meaning there could be potentially women who are forced to stay married to people, legally speaking, at least, against their will. So,
and good old Ron DeSantis in Florida just got rid of permanent alimony, right? Which is just the start.
Really?
Once you
I
get
didn't
rid
even
of-
know that. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's hilarious because it's one of those. I didn't know the Cougars were going to eat my face, says the woman who voted for the face-eating Cougar party.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, I didn't know this was going to happen. Conservative women, and it's like,
I mean,
yeah,
you got to
you
listen.
take
They're
away their
talking
alimony.
about it right here, right? They're saying what they want society to be and what parts of society they're unhappy with. Like, this is how they're going to vote. These are the kind of politicians they're going to push forward. Like,
So if you take away alimony, that's going to make women be more hesitant in getting a divorce.
absolutely. It just, I think sometimes people think, why on an atheist show should we talk about trans rights or whatever? And I understand where that comes from, but I think it's important to notice that the anti-trans worldview doesn't exist in a vacuum, and that these beliefs in people intersect with a lot of other things. And women's rights and women's autonomy is a huge aspect of that. I know there's probably going to be some common propaganda talking points that may or may not come up tonight about how trans rights they think might interface with women's rights and women's autonomy, which we can talk about that when we get there if that comes up. But trans people are the kind of people who are consistently, generally speaking, obviously we're not a monolith, but generally speaking, are far more progressive leaning on women's autonomy and women's rights and things like this. So, anyway.
Yeah, and if you take rights away from women, then trans people are like automatically included in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting to see because their definition of woman is probably going to be based on, biological sex, as they might put it, and people who they might categorize that way, or how that could. Yeah, there's a lot of connecting issues here that tend to spiral out from the trans problem.
And it's like you're right in that, like trans people are going to be caught in this as women's rights are under attack, and it's interesting to note that like it's all trans people, because to some extent, like even trans men don't just gain full levels of male privilege just by being trans men. Like, we're still viewed as women, and then trans women are viewed as women, and cis women are viewed as women, which all of them are not viewed, basically are all viewed as non-men and second-class citizens. And so you're going to, like, all of the trans community is going to be oppressed by this. Like, there really aren't anybody in that sphere that are left out of the oppression in this case.
Interesting. I like that. I've never heard that non-man. So yeah, it's like you're either a man or you're a non-man. Like, they don't even make that distinction.
It's kind of related quite heavily to the like sort of radical feminist kind of take from, like, I think this kind of stuff started in the 90s, where it's like the male as default. Often, like, the white as default is also like another way that society tends to like operate on these things, where it's like when a man is being feminine, you say, oh, stop being such a girl. But when there's no opposite for being a woman. Like, it's you either masculinize her or she is the bad thing. Like, she's either masculinized to the good thing, or she's already at a baseline at the bad thing. And men are already a baseline at the good thing, and they take that away. Like, male as default is really a prominent mindset in our country.
And the fact that, like, if women are going to be more masculine, it's like it's very patronizing in the sense that, like, oh, you're trying so hard to be the thing that we all know that you want to be, but you just can't ever be because you're not really a man and you never will be. But it's cute that you think you can try. And so we're going to let you try and know that you're just not going to ever succeed in that. And yeah, that's at least my experience with it. I don't know if other people experience that.
And it's hilarious because genetically speaking, like women are the default gender of our species. Like women are 100% women and men are like 97% women with a slight variation in our genetic code that makes us men. So it's like, and eventually in like, it was like 2 or 3 million years, like we're all gonna be all women again.
I haven't heard that take. Is that like a projection for evolution or something?
Yeah, I did my thesis on the Human Genome Project, and that's what it said. Like, yeah, women are 100% women, and men are like 97% women. Just a slight variation in the genetic code that makes us men. And eventually, yeah, we're all going to become women again. I think I just said all the same thing again.
Well, no, it's interesting to hear because I've not heard that. So
yeah, that was. That's one of my favorite little fun factoids. Yes, next clip is about 30 seconds long.
Okay.
What's the fastest and easiest way to fit in today's social media culture is to claim you're trans, because everybody will applaud. Anybody who says this is dangerous, don't go down this road, is going to be canceled or declared some kind of bigot. And it's also another way, because, you know, we were teenagers, Sean. You always wanted to stick it to your parents every now and then, right? It's a good way of doing it is to claim you're trans. So this has been almost entirely fueled by the ubiquity of social media. In fact, I just emailed you an article.
You're just doing it for clout, you guys.
Yeah. So not only have like trans people existed in our Western, like US and like developed nations, I don't know what the right politically correct language is to say about that. I'm sorry, don't cancel me. Like we've existed within this culture for as long as it's been around, and there's evidence of like trans people existing in America and in the UK like as back as like the early 1900s. But there's so many examples across all of societies of gender diversity.
Emperor Nero in the 1st century, he tried to pay, or he offered like a substantial, like a fortune to anybody who could make him a woman. Like Emperor Nero, he's the one, he married a eunuch. Like he found a boy that he loved and had the boy castrated and then married him, and he wanted to become a woman himself. So he offered a small fortune to anybody, to any magician who would come and change his gender. So yeah, like that's a 2,000-year-old example.
Right. But like furthermore, it's absolutely asinine levels absurd to suggest that being trans on social media in today's world is a benefit to you. I cannot produce content about anything that isn't related to me being trans, because the only thing people ever want to hear about is how I defend trans arguments, how I take on anti-trans arguments, what things I have to offer to, you know, trans political advocacy. That is the only lane that I am allowed to go in and actually get engagement on social media as a trans person. But furthermore, I receive mountains of abuse every day, all over social media, in my DMs, publicly, on my actual pages, in response to things I say, things that I say that have nothing to do with trans rights. It gets brought up. Like, this is just stupid. Like, cis social media people certainly have to deal with abuse and hate comments, obviously, but they do not have to deal with comments attacking the validity of who they are, whereas trans people deal with that literally all day, every day. And on Twitter in particular, which was the biggest hub for trans community until recently, thanks Threads, it was like, in particular, Elon Musk said it explicitly that he wanted an algorithm that would force you to engage with people. Oh, hey, Forrest, what's up? That would force you to engage with people.
Who is that?
Who disagree with you, which for trans people means that every time I log on to Twitter, I see posts that are about how trans people are destroying the West, how trans people are degenerates, how we're advocating for children to get their genitals removed, or, usually they'll use some much more graphic, inaccurate way of expressing it. Like, it's so divorced from reality to have this take. And this is just a thing they tell themselves. I hear conservatives say this to each other all the time, but is not attached to reality at all.
Right. Like it's such a benefit, obviously. Like if I'm going to better my life and be popular, I'm going to go get that internet clout by saying I'm trans and then getting disowned by my parents and having no financial stability and having people give you death threats and being arrested in the bathroom and like not being allowed to go into society and being told that you shouldn't be a doctor and you shouldn't like work with children because you're a groomer. And like, there's so many things that are awful about being trans. And when I first came out to myself, a lot of the thought process was, no, I can't be trans. Like trans people are murdered. Like trans people like have so much that they have to deal with every day. And like, I don't want to be disowned by my family. Like, I don't know what's going to happen to me if I accept this reality. And that prevented me from coming out for a while because I didn't want that to have to be me. And I think more often trans people aren't wanting that clout. Like, I don't want to have to justify my existence every day. I just want to be a person and to not have to worry if I'm going to be arrested in the bathroom or if I'm going to have healthcare tomorrow or if my parents are going to love me. Like, there's so many more concerns than internet fame.
Yeah.
Every now and then I like to paint my nails black, but I don't usually do it because I'm afraid of like how I'm gonna be viewed by like my family having the area and like just going out in town. Like just painting my nails as a straight white guy is enough to give me pause. Like, it's not, I don't feel like dealing with that. So like just that. So again, imagine what actually being trans is like.
It's interesting you say that because on Transatlantic this past week, we were talking to a caller who I don't remember exactly the situation, but Katie brought up the point that like, well, certainly within the patriarchy, women are very heavily oppressed in so many ways. But for men in the patriarchy, the mildest of transgressions will get you a litany of abuse. Like we were kind of talking about, I think, it was about like, how kids like, how you get ingraded or what would be the word? Like indoctrinated with a disgust towards trans people. And it was because like when you're a little kid, if you're a boy, I remember I went to a private Christian school. I painted my nails one day. I got abused by, not like physically, but teachers harassed me, made fun of me. My dad made fun of me and harassed me. Fellow students made fun of me and harassed me. Like transgressing gender boundaries as a male or perceived boy in our society is extremely damaging to your like reputation. Like people will remember that. Like, oh, it makes sense he's queer because I remember when he painted his nails last week when I saw him at the grocery store. So, it's been hiding there all along, sort of thing. Like, yeah.
So we have 4 boys and we paint their nails from time to time. Mm-hmm. And one day my oldest is 10 and he came back from school. He was like, Daddy, my friends are making fun of me because I painted my nails. It's like, well, fuck them. Tell them that to their face. I didn't really say that, but but yeah, like it's nuts. You can't just paint your nails. Why is that such a big deal? But for some reason it is. All right. Now we're into fatal flaws.
Yes, give me the flaws, please.
This clip's a minute long. So let's get through it.
Flaw number 1. You say the design of the body proves there are only 2 genders.
Yes, and the reason for that is men and women, and this is true of the entire mammalian world, male and female can only do one of 2 things. You can either produce a sperm or an egg. There's no third category. And obviously there are some humans that can't produce either, but that's not a third capacity. That's an incapacity. It's like a minute and a half. And so when you look at the natural design of the body, there's only
I just love that he's like, yeah, there's
Yeah.
this exception to this rule that I'm laying out, but let's just
Yeah, I want to
ignore that.
Yeah, go off, Dr. Ben.
I want to
Doctor
take
him.
this because and we got Forrest Valkai in the chat too, which he makes some amazing videos as well about why there's so much overlap between sexes and how like you can't clearly delineate between just male and female. There's so much overlap and so much potential for variation just because humans are individuals. And yeah, there are like the majority of people fall neatly into one of two categories, but that's not always the case. And it's a lot more frequent that you get variation than you'd think about. And this just like, it really grinds my gears because yeah, he contradicts his point by saying that, well, yeah, you have either egg or sperm. And but of course, yeah, some people might have neither. Well, yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. Like that is a third category. Like it's a straw man to say, well, but there's no third sex. And I absolutely hate that point because we're not asserting that there's a third sex. That was never a claim that we made. We said that there are two kind of like, there are two categories that the majority of people fit into and that there's overlap in between. And there's some people that have some characteristics of both, some people that have characteristics of neither. And that leaves a category of if there's male, female, or none of the above. That's still another category besides those two. And we're not asserting that there's a third gamete type. We're not asserting that there's a third type of genitalia, but there is overlap, and that necessitates another category of not everybody is 100% this or 100% that.
Right. There's also been cases of there's one intersex condition that made the news recently where an individual had male genitals, was raised as a male, always knew they felt trans, and then found out they had a cervix and ovaries and attempted to get pregnant. Like there's so much diversity in human biology and how it configures. And like this is something that we've seen a lot on Transatlantic, and the way we've talked about it are the levels of definitions of sex, right? It's like the intro is like males are XY and girls are XX. That's the intro level. Then you get the people who know how to get to the intermediate level, and that's saying, well, there are only two gametes. Either you have large immobile gametes, those are the eggs, or the small mobile gametes, those are the sperm. Then once you debunk that, because it's very easy to point out that not everyone produces either of those gametes, and there are lots of exceptions and overlap, they'll usually fall back on the, well, it's what your body was organized around producing, which is where you get into the like sexed soul area. Because what the fuck does it mean that my body was organized around producing gametes? If I go get SRS right now and I no longer am producing small mobile gametes, my biology isn't organized around producing anything. I no longer am producing gametes, period. So by their definition, I would cease to be male the second I got SRS. But they can't
even
acknowledge that.
Even before that, because like if you take it to their definitions, like if the body is organized around certain gametes, like the primary factor in creating that environment is hormone activity and not anything else. Because what do the chromosomes produce? Like all of that leads to hormone production, and hormone production leads to anatomical development. So if you're going to pick a keystone like feature in any of this, it's hormones, and that's the one we can change the most easily. So by their definition, if you're gonna say like that gamete potential or organized, like if your body's organized around certain reproductive traits, then like you're admitting that sex can be changed at probably the most fundamental level.
I'm sad that the first fatal flaw in transgender ideology, according to Frank Turek, was his weak ass misunderstanding of human biology.
Yeah, it's not off to a great start.
No.
By the way, speaking of Forrest, I sent you a link to the stream on Twitter. If you would like to join, you are more than welcome, sir.
Oh, cool. Guest appearance.
Guest appearance by Forrest.
We got 30 seconds left of this clip.
All right. Let's.
Am I lagging? I look like I'm lagging. Okay.
Oh well, maybe
two things that the body can produce, either a sperm or an egg. So that seems to indicate there's really only two genders. There's not 58 as Facebook says, or there's only two. Now, I know people are going to try and say, well, gender is different from sex. Well, that new kind of definition has come along 5 minutes ago. But if you insist that gender is completely different than someone's biological sex, then if there's no relationship between the two, then why are people advocating for cross-sex hormones or sex change operations? If gender and sex are completely different.
I'm going to explode.
Oh my God.
Okay. So first of all, no trans person ever on the planet, and I'm obviously exaggerating because Twitter exists. You can find someone who said literally anything.
Oh, of course.
99.99999% of trans people will tell you that nobody thinks gender and sex are orthogonal. Nobody thinks there is no relation between gender and sex. As Ben rightly pointed out, once your sex differentiation has happened, the development of your anatomy takes place due to hormones, right? Like 98% or something like that of people are cisgender. Obviously, there's a heavy correlation with your gender identity and your sex assigned at birth. But as much as you might cry about it, Frank, also, it wasn't 5 minutes ago. The research has been being done on trans people as far back as in Germany, pre-World War II. Gender identity is established just as much as anything else that goes on in your brain. Sexuality, handedness, like your personality, all of that stuff has just as much grounding evidentiary as gender identity. Gender identity is a fact. It exists, and it is just like with personality or depression or schizophrenia or any of these things. It maybe is cool. Well, we miss you for it.
Excuses, Forrest. Excuses.
Yeah, right. Excuses.
He's just scared.
Unacceptable.
Oh man, I have the brain of a squirrel, so I lost my.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. It's okay.
Derail your train of thought.
No, it's okay. I've got a squirrel brain. Everything's gonna derail my thought.
Same.
Oh man, I don't know where I was going with that. Point being that this is something that has been studied and replicated and studied again and replicated. We know trans identities exist. Gender identity is a matrix within the brain. We couldn't point to it, just like we can't point to where depression lives or where personality lives or where anxiety lives or schizophrenia lives in your brain. But we know for a fact that it is a matrix within the brain for understanding yourself. So anyway,
all right.
Cry about the science.
You sound exponentially more educated on the topic than Frank does. Weird, right?
See, he says 5 minutes, like it was it's been a whole 5 minutes since we've known about this because Frank studied science for all of 5 minutes. So that's
right before filming this. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all that he's known about it because he clearly hasn't studied really any other biology besides that. Like excuse me, sir. Like that's something that really, really bugs me is like when people claim to know things about a field that they know nothing about. Like, and it's like, and Captain Dadpool, like this would, you and I are similar. No, you and I are similar, at least in probably get very frustrated with people who do like the stolen valor shit for like the military, where like they claim to have earned something that they didn't. And this is kind of a similar thing is when people like him claim to like be knowledgeable in the subject matter that they clearly aren't and can easily be called out on it. But it's like you are claiming something that you didn't earn and you're using that to then like spread misinformation about fields that are actually like they're studied in a lot of depth. And so like this really pisses me off. Like when people like him claim to know things about a field that he knows nothing about.
Like even if you want to say that like our current conception of gender identity is still recent, like our current conception of gender identity was being studied back in like the 60s and 70s. Like that's how old researching this concept is. So it's absurd, stupid to suggest that it's new.
And like you were saying, Dr. Ben, right now NATO is a huge topic on Twitter. And there's a bunch of people, especially like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, talking about shit about, and like they don't know what got it. I was part of the mission to help Macedonia join NATO. I was there. I went there. I helped them through that process. So when people are on Twitter like, "Oh, Ukraine shouldn't join NATO. It would lead to this," and I'm like, "Shut the fuck up! You don't know a goddamn thing you're talking about. Like you don't know anything about NATO. What? Stop! No one's asking you to pretend like you know anything about NATO either. Like,
Right.
you don't need to present yourself as an expert on this, Frank. You don't need to pretend you're an expert on transgender ideology. Stop it. Nobody's asking you to do that. Just shut your mouth and stay in your lane."
I think this is one of the worst parts about Twitter and social media, and this notion of like everyone deserves a platform to share their ideas. And it's like, okay, sure, but not all ideas are created equal. I don't tolerate Nazis in my vicinity promoting their ideas because I'm thinking, well, this is the marketplace of ideas. I should let them speak, and surely the truth will win out, whatever it is. No, you evaluate what they're saying, and you interface that, you compare that to the actual existing evidence, and then you can rightly say, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. Stop trying to actively malign a group that's already marginalized, already being denied evidence-based healthcare in countless states, already being denied, where we face discrimination and like homelessness and all of these sorts of things. This is absurd. Like you don't need to weigh in on this conversation at all.
Exactly. And that's the privilege that a lot of like guys like this have, is they feel like it's their right to jump in and just voice their opinions when it's not warranted and you're not qualified for it. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. You're a straight white guy. You automatically belong in this conversation. You automatically belong in every conversation like that. No, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
You can shut your whore mouth. How about that?
Shut your whore mouth. Yeah. No. I think, and it's important to also recognize, why is he actually doing this? Because I would bet so much trans identity and transgender debates and things like this are like the most hot button topic in the entire country right now, because it, also distracts us from having to talk about serious global issues or like economic conditions. And it allows us to just talk about the validity of this, a bunch of unqualified people to debate the validity of a minority group that they know nothing about. He's doing this because it gets views, it gets clout, and it makes money. This has nothing to do with an honest, sincere evaluation of the truth.
Well, no, obviously he's not looking for internet clout because it's bad to just do anything because of internet clout. But apparently it's the trans people that are the ones that want internet clout and not him.
Yeah.
Right.
Just trying to be rebellious to your parents.
Yeah.
It's true. All just daddy issues.
All right. This one is 20 seconds long.
Okay.
I think we can make it through this one.
Maybe.
Now, I know we say like if I consider myself a woman trapped in a man's body, that's kind of gender dysphoria. But my question is, why not think it the opposite, Sean? Why not think I'm a man, but I'm enveloping a woman's mind? If that's the case, the way I get healed is I change my mind. And you can change your mind.
Just change your mind, you guys.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So this is something that we get asked about on the show a lot. I hear people call into like the other cis male hosts on the line about the notion of a woman being trapped in a man's body. And for some reason, I'm very confident that all conservatives know that is a metaphor conveying the experience of what it's like to be a trans person in our society, but they insist on interpreting it in the most literal way possible, as if trans people think we are literally a person trapped in a body, like this is fucking Ghost in the Shell or some shit. Like, no, right? This is not what any trans person thinks trans identity is. It is just a fact that some people develop a gender identity that is different from the sex that they were assigned at birth, and that those people benefit greatly from being allowed to transition. Whether or not, Frank Turek thinks that I am a woman, I don't care about. The fact is, I have a gender identity that is inconsistent with my sex, and so transition was good for me, right? Like, I wasn't ever a woman trapped in a man's body. I'm just a person who benefited from transition. Yeah, so this is stupid. Also, there's wealth and wealths and wealths of evidence talking about the absolute non-existence of efficacy of conversion therapy. So just change your mind is what actually leads to trans people killing themselves. So
Yeah. Jesus fuck. All right.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to say about it. Like, this is a point that's just so laughable from him that it's like you don't really even have to go too far to debunk it, because it just like kind of debunks itself.
yeah.
Yeah, like choose if you can just change your mind, then choose to be trans right now, Frank.
Right.
Like, do right now.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't?
Actually,
Why not?
this is my challenge to Frank Turek, if you're watching. If you choose to be trans and commit to a life of choosing to be trans for a period of, I've been on hormones for 5 years, let's say 5 years, then I will choose to detransition. Swear, right here, right now, I'll hold to my word. If you choose to transition and be a woman for the next 5 years, I'll detransition.
Just choose to be trans, Frank. Think of all the clout you can get on social media.
Yeah. So fucking stupid.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, also, sorry, hopefully we're not like destroying your algorithm by cursing incessantly.
Oh, no, we cuss all the time.
Okay,
Cuss, stream, tell inappropriate jokes. I don't give a fuck about the algorithm.
okay, cool.
Okay. I think we're on to point or fatal flaw number 2. Transgenderism must presuppose fixed genders.
Fatal flaw number 2. For fun, you say transgenderism must presuppose fixed genders. Explain.
Yeah, because if I'm a man and I think I'm a woman, I have to have some idea what a man is and some idea what a woman is to know I have this mismatch between my psychology and my biology. If there were no fixed genders, I wouldn't be able to recognize the mismatch. Secondly, if I'm going to try and make the so-called transition to become a woman, I have to have some idea what a man is and some idea what a woman is to make the so-called transition. In fact, it would be impossible for transgenderism to exist unless there were fixed reference points. So on one hand, people are trying to say that gender is completely fluid. On the other hand, you have to admit that genders can't be completely fluid. Otherwise, transgenderism would be impossible. If there weren't fixed reference points by which you could say I'm transgender, you wouldn't be able to be transgender. And by the way,
There's so much wrong here. There's so much.
I literally just opened a notepad because he said so many things wrong in that. I was like, oh, for all the future fatal flaws, I need to take notes so I can respond to everything. Because like the very first thought I had when he started talking was, I love how he uses presuppose as a pejorative. It's really funny. It's like when Christians say like, oh, well, you have faith in science, like using faith as a pejorative. It's like the same exact thing.
He's a presuppositional apologist. Like, so that's funny.
I mean, I don't know if that's actually his position. It may or may not be.
I think it is his position. I'm pretty sure it is his position. Yeah, which makes it even funnier.
But it's like, again, this is exactly like where he's like hearing things on social media that are used to like convey ideas and taking them as if they're truth claims that trans people are making about society. Like the notion that gender identity can be fluid, or that the gender identity exists on a spectrum that is fluid, is not to say that somebody's gender identity isn't fixed over their lifetime. In fact, most trans people, and this doesn't apply to all trans people, there are exceptions. There are trans people who are more gender fluid and they fluctuate from time to time. But most trans people, their identity is fixed from a very early age. Most people have an awareness of their gender identity super, super young. And while that's not the case for everybody, some people come into awareness of it after, like further down the road. usually when you look back, you can see that those things existed in your life the entire time. I would say that I have always been a woman. My gender identity was always what it is now, and that I just used medicine to make me feel better in my body. Also, like, sorry, I'm talking so much. I want to give Ben a chance to talk too, but I just, this notion of like, you have to have some idea of what a woman is in society to transition. Like, yes, I do have some idea of what a woman is in our society, and that doesn't change or my point or help your point at all. Like, the fact that I can identify that women in our society have longer hair and women in general have breasts and like curvier figures or whatever in general is not like, is not saying that people can't change. It's talking about averages and populations, right? Like, I can acknowledge that women tend to be a sort of way in our society and still acknowledge that not all women are like that and not all women should have to be like that. Yeah, I don't know. Ben, do you have more thoughts too?
Yeah. On this one, it's like there's kind of two parts to this for me, because like why people transition, like, and there's multiple different reasons why people would undergo certain types of transition. And some people will undergo all of the steps of transition and other people won't. And there's different reasons why. I mean, some of it, of course, there's the personal identity part of like, this is my body that I live in, and I would feel better personally if I had this anatomy. This would feel more in line with the type of body that I want to have. And so that's definitely part of it. Like, some people are really like have really strong feelings about that connection between their mind and their body. And so, like, for some people, that is the main thing that they want to change. But then like other people don't see as like, don't experience as much dysphoria, or maybe not any, like with the certain anatomy, and maybe they're fine with keeping their body the way it is, but want to do more social transition, and that's what's right for them. But like along with that, like, you can get into the weeds on certain things like a genderless society. And like, it sounds great. Like, if you think about gender roles and getting rid of that, getting rid of gender stereotypes and all that, and like letting people identify as who they are without needing to meet certain goalposts or whatever. Like, that sounds great, but like, that's not attainable. And I don't think it ever will be attainable. And so it's like, you have this society that like gender as a whole, like separate from gender identity, but like gender in society is how society organizes people based on these certain anatomical characteristics. And like, no matter if you fit within certain roles or not, like, those roles and expectations are going to exist in society, and people are going to treat you a certain way based on how you fit those roles. So like, even if I didn't want to be gender conforming, but I mattered more to me to be referred to as a man, or to be treated in this way, to be called this name and all that, like, I might need to interact with society and give cues, such as my hair, such as my clothes, such as certain things that let society know this is the role that I'm taking in society. And that oftentimes is an easier thing for us to have those goalposts met and then have the response given. Do I think that that's how it should be? Not necessarily, but like, you have to kind of give and take a little bit. And unfortunately, like, that's the reality for like the majority of trans people, is you have to pick which parts of transition are most important to you, and then which ones maybe do I not want to undergo for XYZ reasons. And so oftentimes you're not doing all of the things, but it's not because you're not fully a man or fully a woman. It's just like, all of these parts are very dynamic, and you have to think about how is this going to impact the way that I want to live my life.
Right. Like, I didn't get like a boob job because I was like, woman equals boob, me woman, me get boob. Like, it wasn't like, that seems to be what he thinks is the train of logic for trans people. Mm-hmm. It's more like, I realize that I'm a woman, that women in our society, women, and generally speaking, have breasts, and I want people to recognize when I'm walking around in the public, in society, as you have to do as a person, that I'm a woman. So it would be advantageous for me to get boobs because it would make me feel better about my body personally, internally here. And it makes interfacing with society a lot easier when they can recognize at a glance what my gender is rather than me having to convince them all the time. Yeah, anyway.
All right. Real quick, thank you so much for the super chat, Anton, 666. And funny you should mention, that's going to be our next clip.
Nice.
Because, yeah, that's a doozy. And Neil, I'm not sure what happened to your wrench. It seems like all of my mods have lost their wrench. Except for
Demoted.
I'm not sure what happened there. I'm going to have to figure that out. I know I got a new card. So, like, my subscription to StreamYard expired. And I had to put my new card in there to keep it going. So maybe I lost all my settings when that happens. So I don't know.
Let's be honest. Neil lost his wrench because he's a bad boy and he doesn't deserve it anymore.
It has
That's
something to
obviously
do
the
with
reason.
has something to do with the mustache. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely mustache.
All right.
Just kidding.
Let's get rid of you. All right. Love you guys. We're having fun.
Poor Neil. Neil became the target of tonight.
Neil can handle it.
I know he can.
I think you did have a wrench, Dr. Kip. I think Nitty had one. Courageous had one. So yeah, like everybody's wrenches are gone, and I'm not sure why. So yeah, I'll have to figure that out. Sorry, guys. Hopefully, we won't get a lot of trolls in here tonight, but seems to be pretty calm so far. All right. Anyway.
This denial of fixed genders has created a bit of a civil war, so to speak, in the LGBTQ community, because if the T's get their way, Sean, that there are no fixed genders, the L's, the B's, and the G's don't exist. Because how can you be a lesbian unless there are fixed genders? How can you be bisexual unless there are fixed genders? How can you be gay unless there are
Since when does
fixed
he
genders?
care about
Those
the
ideas-
LG and B?
Yeah,
He already admitted that he doesn't recognize homosexuality. So
it's just the ramblings of somebody who has clearly never spoken to a lesbian in his entire fucking life.
right.
Like, there's actually I've seen quite
Outside
a lot
of
of
the sex
discussion.
hotline. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, outside of lesbian porn that he probably furiously watches online. No, there's been actually a lot of discussion in between, like, queer people, generally speaking, and trans people about the way, like, the transness interfaces with sexuality now, and how, like, a lot of lesbians are adopting a sort of mindset of, like, lesbians as non-men who love non-men instead of women who love women. Not every lesbian necessarily adopts that, but, like, there are countless trans women in lesbian relationships with women. There are countless trans men in gay relationships with cis gay men. Like, we're fine. We've got it figured out. Are there some LGBT people who have been pushing back on this because they think that they have a genital preference that's being, like, pushed on them or whatever? Absolutely. But those people are also swallowing propaganda wholesale because nobody's trying to force you to touch anyone's fucking genitals. Like, that's crazy talk. That's just not happening. Like, there may be talk, just like there was with regard to, like, being attracted to, like, races or not being attracted to certain races, about how, like, that might be informed by prejudices you carry or, like, beliefs that you have that are really bad about that group of people. But nobody's trying to say that because of that, now you have to go date a Black person to overcome that, or you have to go date a trans person to overcome your genital preference. That's crazy. Like, this, again, ramblings of somebody who's never spoken to a lesbian in their entire fucking life.
It's also it's very patronizing to be like, yeah, I'm this cishet white man who is not at all involved in the queer community, and also I just talked about why the queer community is just bad in general, but also I'm going to speak on behalf of the LGs and Bs, because they think that trans people are icky, and so I'm going to white knight for this group that I also hate. and it's just wrong on so many levels. Like he's definitely been drinking the Kool-Aid, and you can tell.
Like, do you know what lesbians like? Boobs. Do you know what lots of trans women have? Boobs. Straight men like boobs. Trans women have boobs. Like, this is not complicated. Trans people don't upset your matrix of sexuality in any way, shape, or form. Like, you might be insecure because you're finding yourself attracted to a trans person and you think that means something for you, but it doesn't have to. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I just love that. Like, there's every community has its drama and has its infighting. And I'm like, you're a Christian. How many denominations of Christianity are there? So, what denomination are you going to subscribe to? Which denomination of Christianity has the best argument? Are you going to become Southern Baptist? Are you going to become Methodist because the Episcopalians don't like the Pentecostals? Like, what? Like, you can't point to like the arguments within a community as like some sort of like point at. I don't even know where I'm trying to go with this.
Yeah. No. You're
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's so many different denominations of Christianity. If that's suddenly a point against the validity of trans identities, then Christianity's fucked because there are countless denominations. Like, there's no agreement internally within Christianity, even within most denominations, even within most churches, about exactly what Christianity is.
Oh yeah, churches split over what color carpet they're trying to put down. Like, literally, I've seen that happen in person. Like, fuck off with this argument.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Fuck off.
I think we got, where are we at? 29:15. I think we got another minute of this clip, and this is where we're going to get into the Matt Walsh documentary reference.
Oh yeah.
And praising of J.K. Rowling. So buckle up.
I'm ready.
Identities presuppose fixed genders. And by the way, this is why Matt Walsh's documentary.
It's a biography. What is a woman is a
so many
biography?
of these transgender advocates and left-wing academics flummoxed by the simple question, what is a woman? Because they're kind of caught in a dilemma. If they say that a biological female is a woman, then transgender ideology is false, because transgender ideology says I can be a biological man, but really I'm a woman. If they refuse to define what a woman is, which is what they tended to do in the documentary, then transgenderism is not possible. Because if you don't know what a woman is, how can you transition to something else?
20 more seconds.
You can't. You have to know what you are in order to make the transition. And you also have to know what you're transitioning into. And by the way, the feminists are not happy with this either, Sean, because if there are no genders,
As if you
there
care
are no
about
women, and
feminism.
if there are no women, there are no women's rights. This is why J.K. Rowling, of course, the author of the Harry Potter series, has said you're erasing women by this trans ideology. And
all right.
So now he cares about women. So he only cares about women to oppress trans people, but he doesn't.
I'd like to point out that his reasoning for showing that trans people can't define women was they said it in the documentary. So Christianity has so thoroughly poisoned his mind that he thinks circular reasoning is just A-okay. They said it in the documentary, therefore it's good. They said it in the book, therefore it's good. Like, that's not how that works, Frank. Just because you saw trans people struggle, which, by the way, I'd be willing to bet Matt Walsh interviewed lots of people and that he chose specifically the examples which most benefited his narrative, right?
Right.
That's what people do in these situations.
Yeah, like he one of them was a sociology professor, like with the focus on gender studies, and this person was giving like a brilliant monologue about the complexity of gender and why there's not a clear definition. And of course, Matt Walsh just like fast forwards over it and is like, see how long it takes for him to like answer this question. Like, he answered your question very well, but since you just wanted like a one and done answer, like, of course it doesn't meet your criteria for what you want, because your criteria are bullshit. Like, you set up this arbitrary standard that it has to meet. And I want Arden to speak more on this issue, because she gives a really good comparison between the what is a woman question.
Oh yeah.
So I don't want to steal your thunder there, so I'll let you share it.
Well, it's just like I would be comfortable taking. Now, I don't like the way he orders the words. Like, if it was adult female human, I think that would be probably an acceptable definition of woman. I don't object to the notion of biology being included in the definition. The problem is the notion that because a definition has a certain word, that there are no exceptions. And a great example of this is motherhood, right? What is a mother? Well, traditionally, we're going to talk about, if we want to go the way they think about things, the person who provided the large immobile gamete for the purposes of reproduction, like that is the person who is your mother, the person who contributed the egg to what was your fetus, right? But obviously, we in society have grown a lot on that, and we know that those aren't the only definitions of parents. My dad, my stepdad, is way more of a dad to me than my actual dad is. I have also a stepmom. There are adopted parents who are wholeheartedly amazing parents to kids, right? And I know that these people think this way. A great example of that is they were interviewing some education group to talk about the how this group informed the CDC that they shouldn't open schools during COVID. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, the woman who they were had I'm not representing this super well. It was like a hearing, like they were trying to testify before Congress whether or not they informed the CDC correctly. This woman was a lesbian who's married to her partner and has a stepchild, and she referenced that during the hearing. And Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically called her out and said, "You are not a mother. You are not their biological mother, so you are not a mother."
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah, right. So I'm totally fine accepting adult female human or even adult human female, whatever. But the problem is that these people don't acknowledge that all of the words within that are complex and controversial. Adult is completely a socially constructed concept. We can talk about we have ages of consent and things like this because we know that probably people vary and when they have the psychological capacity to consent, but generally speaking, it's good to err on the side of caution and put it at a certain age that might be slightly higher than maybe some people could or whatever, right? So adult, we know, is a super fuzzy concept. There's no time where we aren't bugs, right? Who have like a clearly defined stage of development. It's gradual as fuck. Human, that's also controversial as fuck. Where is the line for, this is known as biology where it comes to like evolution. The lines between species can get where one species becomes another is extremely fuzzy. And then female is also, as we already pointed out at the beginning of the stream, extremely controversial. Like, are we going to use the gamete definition? Because if so, there are people without gametes. Well, it's organized around producing gametes. So it's this nebulous, non-physical essence of what their body was organized around producing. That also doesn't make sense. I'm comfortable with the notion that adult human female is an acceptable definition for a woman, as long as we acknowledge that intersex women who don't fit your definition, Frank, of female are also women, and trans women who don't fit your definition of female are also women. No definition in the entire English language has a clean set thing. This is set theory, right? It's like the meme where they're like, define chair, and they're like, a place where you can sit that has 4 legs, and then they post a picture of a horse. Set theory is, there's nothing that you can define that's not going to have exceptions that should be included, or things included, or things that would fit that definition that shouldn't be included.
And that's like, what about a beanbag chair? Is that a chair?
Right.
Not a chair because it's got no legs.
Doesn't have any legs. But
exactly.
But people
no,
but there's no third category of chair. There's only.
What if I sit on a log, a stump?
That's the
cut,
thing is, like,
right?
these fuckers can only think in black and white. They're completely incapable of exploring the nuance in these different positions. So when they ask one of these like gotcha questions, they expect a black and white answer that fits their like preconceived like definitions. And when that doesn't happen, they're like, you could not meet my expectations for the answer that I asked you to give. You're like, no, fucker. It's because you're asking you're asking for an impossible answer.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You want the answer to be black or white when the reality is there's several shades of gray.
And that's why I've opted to, I think, like politically, optically speaking, I think it's advantageous to take their definition because their definition works for most people. You just have to acknowledge that definitions are not hard boundaries that exclude people from groups. That's not how definitions work.
Yeah.
Right? Definitions are not what's the thing people say? They're descriptive, not prescriptive,
Not
right?
prescriptive,
Yeah, you're not a woman because like prescriptively, according to the holy dictionary, women fit this way. Like you're a woman because that's how we describe people like you in society. So yeah, Frank's stupid again.
Again. All right.
Again.
Oh God.
Oh, I had another thing that I didn't even touch on, but that's okay. I don't want to.
You
I
go
literally
ahead.
could talk forever. I was just gonna say, like, he was saying that feminists have a problem with this because if trans women are women, then nobody's a woman, and so women don't have rights, which is again stupid because trans women face misogyny. Like, I need women's protections just as much as any cis woman, right? Like, I also have men be creepy and misogynistic to me all the time. I went to a reptile expo with my partner like a month and a half ago, and some dude was like to Matt while I was standing next to him, said, "Hey, how long have you had the trophy wife, huh?" Like, and then goes on to show Matt a picture of his spouse, like bragging about how he has a trophy wife.
What?
Like, that's straight up misogyny.
That's weird as shit. Who would do that?
He didn't detect my maleness and then not be misogynistic to me. I am a woman in society, and so he treated me with misogyny. Trans women deserve
Arden, I
just as much
apologize
protection.
for that. I don't appreciate you sharing that publicly.
Sorry, I don't want to call you out, but I had to do it.
That was supposed to be our secret, all right? It was my mistake.
Right, I mean,
But
look,
yeah,
I don't make any apologies.
And again, like Frank, he's not a feminist, and he doesn't care about women's rights, and he often advocates against them. So it's like, again, just like he can't speak for the LGB people, he also cannot speak for feminists, and he has no business in pretending to take their side just for this one issue, because he's just going to turn around and support biblical misogyny.
Yeah. This is such a typical thing when attacking minorities, that they will weaponize entire groups of people to try to undermine it, which is like not logically consistent. It doesn't actually demonstrate the point that they're trying to demonstrate. Like, total non sequitur, but that's like their operating procedure.
Yeah, and that's what's we talked a little bit about this earlier. That's what's so infuriating. As a straight white guy, how frustrating it is to see other straight white guys act like they can speak for every community out there. And I'm like, why? Like, I guarantee you Frank Turek has an opinion on furries, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Like, why would you even stick your neck out there? You're not.
Why are you the person that they're calling on to talk about this issue when you could? Well, I mean, the people that are going to take his side that are from the community are like, there aren't that many of them. So of course they're not going to pick one of those people. They're going to pick this guy. Like, that's very representative of how strong your case actually is. If you're the person that they're picking to talk about this issue about minorities that you're not part of.
Korea, we'll try to get to that. I want to get through the clips. And if we have time, we'll get into some of the extra stuff. But yeah, I want to get to this next one because now we're on to Fatal Flaw. Oh, we're already in Fatal Flaw number 3. I lost track. No, we're not. This is Fatal Flaw number 3. Here we go.
Case. Let's move to flaw number 3. You can change your mind, but not your biology.
Yeah, well, that's contrary to what, of course, transgender ideologues say, that you can change your biology, but you can't. And as I mentioned earlier, why, when our psychology and our biology are mismatched, we think the solution is to change our biology. I mean, why would you change your biology? We don't do this with parallel conditions.
But you just said you
and
can't
probably
change your
the
biology.
closest.
So can you or can you not change your biology? I'm sorry to cut. I'm
He
just
doesn't
like,
fucking know.
this is infuriating to me. Yeah, it's like you can't change your biology, but like, okay, are hormones part of your biology? Yes or no? Because I'd say, yeah, that's part of your biology, and you can change that. Your anatomy is part of your biology, and yeah, you can change that. So you can change your biology. That's completely dishonest to say that you can't. And then he even like contradicts himself, and he says you can't change your biology, but then they're trying to change. They're thinking the answer is to change their biology. Well, yeah, because you can do it. Like, I don't see the problem here, except the fact that you just contradicted yourself, bud.
Leave it to Frank.
Parallel condition would be anorexia. You know, when somebody is anorexic and they say, but I'm overweight, you would not say, you're right. Let me give you liposuction. You would say, hey, dear, your mind's playing tricks on you. You're a dangerously underweight.
This is a test.
We need to get you nourishment. We're not going to get you liposuction. Yet, why would we say we're going to cut off perfectly healthy sex organs when somebody has a delusion, a mental condition that is causing them to believe something they are not?
You're not going to make it.
Another example would now be the transabled. I don't know if you've heard of this recently, Sean, but there are people out there who are claiming that they're disabled, even though everything's working perfectly fine. And so some of them want to have their limbs removed so they can be disabled. Now, what doctor would say, you're right. You are disabled. Let me take off your arm, or let me take off your leg. Oh my God. Any doctor would be sued for malpractice if they ever did that, rightfully so. And yet.
All right.
Yeah, because they don't do that. It's not the same fucking thing.
Yeah. The biggest thing to talk about here is that he's comparing trans treatments for gender dysphoria and transition care to other things. Those are other things. Those are other things that are also evidence-based and just have different treatments indicated for them. I'm sorry that you don't know that other things happen to people, Frank, but they do, believe it or not.
And they're not even the same type of thing. Like there are papers that like I like to throw out there, but it's like the pathophysiology of something like anorexia or body dysmorphia. Like, it's, if you think about a psychological condition being something that causes like distress and dysfunction. So like you need to have those things for it to be a mental disorder. And you can have things that have distress but not dysfunction. And you can have things that cause dysfunction and not distress, and that's like a whole separate thing as well. But if you think about where the distress is occurring with something like anorexia, like he was saying, it's somebody who is not overweight that believes that they are, and that is it's a disconnect with how their brain views their body, and that's not the same with trans people. Trans people, all of us, for the most part, like, I understand what my biology is. I'm not delusional about what organs I have. I fully acknowledge the organs that I was born with and the physiology that I have. So it's not an impaired perception of yourself to be trans, whereas it is in anorexia, where you have this distorted view of yourself. And so the distress for anorexia is in the brain itself. And if you change the external factors, you're still going to have distress and you're not resolving it, which is why it's problematic, because affirming the poor perception in that case is not resolving the distress. But with trans people, it is, because we acknowledge what our body is. We know all of that. And if we change the external factors, we alleviate the dysphoria. And so you can treat gender dysphoria very, very well. And of course, you have those exceptions of people that will persistently have dysphoria despite having intervention. But that's, I think, pretty rare. I don't know exact numbers, but I think the majority of people, at least, even if it's not 100% improvement, they have some level of improvement in their quality of life. And like, even like, I'm not all the way through all of the procedures I want to have. But my quality of life is like probably 80% right now compared to it was 60%, which like I'll take that. I think anybody would take 80% quality of life versus 60%. Even like somebody without dysphoria that just has gender euphoria, if you're going from quality of life of 97% to 99%, that's still an improvement. And I think many people would opt for that intervention to have that improvement. So it's comparing these two things shows not only a lack of knowledge of psychology, of physiology, of medicine, but it's I think an intentionally dishonest example, and it can be very convincing to somebody who doesn't understand the nuances of psychological diagnosis.
Yeah, well said. I was doing a stop pause in there because
that's a soapbox of mine right there.
No, absolutely. I think the strongest part is the point about how when anorexic people get those treatments done, their quality of life does not improve, and this is known and indicated in the literature. And with trans people, it does, and this is known and indicated in the literature. All right, what do we got here?
This is actually something that our friend at Hive Science sent me.
I love Bree.
Yeah, Bree sent me this earlier today, and I had not seen this. Mm-hmm. And I'm blown away. He posted this on his own channel.
Oh God!
We won't watch the whole thing, but because it's like 7 minutes long.
Have you ever heard of gynecomastia?
I had it.
And so did you have that fixed?
Yes, I did.
And did that make you feel affirmed in your gender and comfortable in your body?
No, when I was in the Navy, nobody knows this, by the way. Jesus, now I'm revealing I need a HIPAA form to sign here.
So, Frank.
It's not HIPAA if you're saying this publicly. Sorry.
Right.
That's not a case you can
Frank,
bring up.
Through the Navy, got gynecomastia, which, for those who don't know, is removing of breast tissue.
Yeah.
To make his chest seem more masculine.
Right.
So
sorry.
Yeah. So like, why is it okay for you to? And I've seen other examples like Jordan Peterson got like hair follicles, like his receding
hair transplant. Yeah.
Shit. It was like, why is it okay for you fuckers to get all this Viagra even? HRT, hormone replacement therapy, like that's gender affirming care. You're undergoing these procedures that affirm your gender, that make you feel more like what you think you are.
Oh yeah, he cut off healthy organs. He cut off his healthy organs because your like gynecomastia is very common and very normal in about a third of cis boys. So it's completely normal and for people to get these procedures, and you can say it's healthy tissue. And even going into something like circumcision, you're cutting off a healthy organ of somebody, but that's okay to do without their consent at all, because of a religious basis. But it's not okay for someone to consent to a surgery that they want to have, which I don't know if he specifically mentions this, but like it's important to mention that like apart from the few examples that like again going back to the sticky definitions of when are you an adult, because around ages 16 17 you get some differences in the legal system and consent laws for like top surgery, but I'm going to mention for bottom surgery. So for genital surgeries, we are not doing those on minors. You have to be of an age of consent to have those done. So they'll bring up arguments like that and say, well, they're castrating children. Well, they're not, because you have to be of an age of consent to even be considered for that.
Yeah. I also think Ben pretty thoroughly went through this. The only thing I had to add was that he was saying, you can't change your biology. And it's like, that's just untrue. I can go to Thailand and get my entire downstairs rearranged to be a completely functioning neovagina, and that's a thing that people have been doing for many decades now. You can change your biology, you can change your hormones. The only thing you can't change are your chromosomes.
So
it's I mean, I'm not even sure how it would make sense to change your chromosomes, but
I
guess
matter.
hypothetically it could happen. But regardless, it's like the notion that you can't change your your biology is just wrong. You can. Like, I'm sorry the future scares you, Frank, but science is fucking awesome, and biology is no longer a constraining factor on anyone. So, including you, apparently.
Right. Yeah. Even like I have a vasectomy. And I've seen like it's nuts on Twitter. Like people are like, if you had a vasectomy, you're not a real man or something. I'm like, the thing about having a vasectomy, what that means is my wife does not have to take birth control.
Yeah.
That's one thing that like blew, because I had a vasectomy before me and my current wife got together, and she was like, I don't have to take my birth control anymore. And I was like, no, not really. And she was like, oh my God. Like she was blown away, and she was so happy about it because it gave her irregular periods, and I'm probably divulging too much. Suffice it to say, she was very excited to stop having to take her birth control pills.
Yeah, and maybe Frank has bought into, I don't know, but a lot of gender critical anti-trans people, the whole notion that you can change their biology is actually a big part of what they're advocating against. It's not actually related to the actual philosophical concept of transhumanism. I know because Matt and I have talked about this quite a lot, very thoroughly, but it is a conspiracy using basically the same name and some similar concepts they have like adopted to push this conspiracy that it's usually Jewish billionaires also. So, there's some anti-Semitism for you as well, that we're trying to dehuman and turn basically people into robots who will do whatever our oligarchs tell us or whatever. But the reality is that we're not at that place. All that people are doing is modifying their body because we can, and it makes our life better. Measurably, like empirically so.
Yeah. Can't confirm. I haven't worn a condom in years. It's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Real quick, we had a question from Nitty, which I think is a good one. Thanks by the way for the super chat, Nitty. Has the panel encountered the detransition influencers that say they had surgery as minors?
Yes.
Yes, and they're not, like I said, it's not genital surgeries. Those are people that have had top surgery, which again is that sticky area of some states will let you have medical consent around age 16 or age 15, and then some people also like they had their parents involved in this decision. It's very complicated, like how that stuff gets approved for late teens, but like these are teens. They're not children per se, and the law is different. Arden, I think you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's also important to notice that some of the detransitioners who are pushing the trans lobby convince me to transition stuff, while they may have started transitioning as minors, I forget her name, but one of the most prominent detransitioners who pushes the story got all of her surgical procedures done as an adult. So they will intentionally conflate things and lie about timelines and confuse you to suggest that they went into a doctor and the doctor was like, we're going to cut your tits off right now. It has to happen right now. Get on the table. Like that's the image they want you to have in your mind. And that is what is absolutely so fucking far removed from reality.
And Sean McDowell has done interviews with people who claim they regret transitioning.
Yeah,
I think a few times fairly recently. And
I
it's
could
like,
get on this. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not even talking to the people who don't regret, which is the vast majority.
Right.
You're focusing on just like 3 people that you can find.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I can get on my. I've talked about this so many times. I'm not going to do it right now because I know we've got more to cover, and I don't want to keep Ricky here all night. But I actually detransitioned. I transitioned from 14 to 17, detransitioned, and then transitioned again at 22. That is actually the more common phenomenon for people who detransition. It's significantly more common for them to transition again down the road and have detransitioned. Really? Yes. And to have detransitioned because of harassment and abuse and how toxic society makes your life as a trans person. It's like 60% of people who detransition cite that as the reason, not that they were taken advantage of or that transition wasn't right for them. And this is coming from a study of 27,000 people back in, I think 2015 was when they sampled. And they're doing the updated version of this study. One of our guest hosts on Transatlantic is actually the director of the study. The representative sample of 27,000 trans people who were sampled, who detransitioned because it wasn't right for them, was 0.2%. Now, I want to be clear that there are other studies that will say 2 to 3%, but that is the highest you're going to get.
But still.
And when you look at other surgeries regret rates, they are so much higher. Like robot-assisted prostatectomies are extremely high. Knee replacement surgeries are extremely high. LASIK eye surgery is extremely high. Childbirth apparently is high. But we don't sit here and debate whether or not people should have access to LASIK eye surgery or knee replacements or prostatectomies or be allowed to give childbirth. We're sitting here talking about trans people. Why is that? It's clearly not because there's actually a significant risk of regret. The medical community isn't concerned about this at all. The medical community has for many decades been very clear on where trans healthcare is, which is evidence-based. It's just, this is all a joke.
Yeah. All right. Well, the rest of the clips are going to go kind of quick.
Okay.
I think we
I'll
might
try not to jump in.
Yeah, I'll try to be quiet.
I think we'll spend a little bit of time on this next one, but after that, it's like Fatal Flaw number 4 is less than a minute long, and then number 5 is less than a minute long.
Okay.
So all that to say, if you want to be long-winded, go for it. We're nearing the end. All right, here we go.
Temporary problem.
So if almost every other issue we can think of, and you gave the example of anorexia, is to fix the mind, not the body.
1 minute.
And I would presume that people would have to recognize this as a whole. Why is it different in this case? Why do people say, well, when it comes to the issue of trans, we've got to shift the body? Why is it different here than other issues?
I think it's because it's related to sex, Sean. Sex is sort of the new religion in our
Freud
society.
has entered
Sex
the
is
chat.
the one thing that you can't suggest any restraints to. The last restraint that's about to go down is the age of consent. In fact, when I first wrote the book, Correct Not Politically Correct, back in 2008, I had a FBI agent email me, and he said, I've been undercover with NAMBLA, North American Man-Boy Love Association. And he said, the arguments that you talk about in the book, Correct Not Politically Correct, the arguments about being born a certain way, so therefore I'm justified to act this way. He said, NAMBLA is using that now. The pedophiles are essentially saying, we're born this way. And so that justifies our behavior. And that's coming now. He wrote me that back in about 2009.
Okay, hold on. Let me get this, y'all. Let me start this one off.
Okay, go for it.
Because I had never heard of this organization before, and I looked it up, and when I tell you I've never been more scared to Google anything in my life, this is something I was like, okay, NAMBLA, immediately throw open my curtains, make sure there's no FBI agents out there. But yeah, this was an organization that advocated for eliminating the age or marriage age. So literally adult men that are attracted to young boys. But the organization disbanded in 2006 from what the research I've done. So he's saying in 2009, an FBI agent. Now the reason it disbanded was because they discovered there were agents like in their midst blowing their cover. But he's saying this happened in 2009, but the organization disbanded in 2006. So it's like, what's happening here? And it's only like after it disbanded, there's like 3 or 4 people that maintained a website. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying that there's like 3 or 4 people, and he's saying that they represent the entire transgender movement. Like, fuck out of here. But on top of that, he's saying that these arguments, like, this is just the way I was born. That's an argument that they made. Another argument that they used was freedom of speech. Because when other organizations like the FBI were trying to shut them down, they were like, you're fighting against my right to the freedom of speech. So it's like, why aren't you bringing that up, Frank?
Right. Yeah,
Like,
if there's an analogy between trans people's arguments and that's significant, then it should be significant. Yeah, that you also have a.
Yeah. So I highly question the validity of this story. Because again, the organization disbanded 3 years before he wrote this book.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly this mysterious FBI agent showed up, is like, hey, Frank, you were right about everything. Really?
Yeah.
Fucking really? Okay.
Yeah. I would also be suspicious about whether or not that federal agent is legit. But even if I accept that the agent is, like, my position on that shit is that I want the most kids to be safe. And the best way the most informed evidence way of protecting kids in this situation is destigmatizing non-offending pedophiles so that they are not ashamed to get help, because that's what actually protects children. I don't think anyone is born with any sexual inclination. Those sexual things are generally, I'm pretty sure, thought to be learned in all cases. So nobody's like, okay, got to be careful there. Like, but the whole point is that once a sex thing is learned, even if it is developed, like developmentally, it can't change. Those people need help, right? That's how we protect kids, making sure that those people get help and don't touch any fucking kids. But that has nothing to do with trans people. It's, again, I mean, that's what this entire video has been this guy saying, this group says this thing does this group does this, that reflects badly on trans people, when it's unrelated to trans people entirely. I'm happy to have a discussion about the stigmatization between people who have no control over their attractions or whatever in society and need help. That's fine. That's a conversation we can have, although I know it's controversial on the internet to say the true thing, which is that you need to destigmatize so that they get help, so that kids are protected. That's the evidence-based way to protect kids. But, again, it's unrelated, so I don't know why we're talking about it.
Yeah, there is a case, and ironically, I learned about this in a psychology course in Bible college. But there's Thomas Westbrooks would know more about this than me. But there was someone who, like, he had a minor attraction, or an attraction to minors, and then there was something like a tumor that was pressing on his pituitary gland, and they had it removed, and then that attraction went away, or something like that.
I'm sure there are cases like that.
Yeah, there's like weird phenomena like that, but that's a whole nother conversation that does not apply to the trans community.
Yeah, just
Not
because some people, like, so my understanding is that NAMBLA is not like a group of people who are actually advocating for the betterment and rights of people who unfortunately are afflicted with what must be an awful attraction to have. That sounds torturous and miserable for those people. They're not trying to advocate for those people, right? So, like, the fact that a manipulative propaganda group who wants to make it okay to do bad and illegal, harmful things uses an argument is, like, again, just meaningless and irrelevant. Like, manipulators are going to manipulate, okay? Water's wet. Like, I don't know what irrelevant.
Right, like, these are completely different too, because, like, we're talking about a consent issue. Like, one group is dealing with a population that cannot consent, whereas, like, the LGBT community is all about consent, and it's okay to be in a relationship with whoever you want as long as there is mutual enthusiastic consent of all parties involved. And so, like, we're so heavily focused on proper consent, and, like, that's the same thing with trans people. Like, it's about like, you are consenting to things for your own body. And so, like, this is such a flawed comparison, because it's like, again, you can take things on its surface level that seem similar, but then you go deeper into what are we actually comparing here? And there isn't anything to compare because they're completely different scenarios. And like the majority of the LGBTQ community does not support like pedophilia at all. Like the acting out of those people. So it's like
offending pedophiles to serve prison. End of story. Like there's no
like we don't support that.
And what's funny is you can take his own argument and turn it against themselves. Like, oh, you're a Christian, you're a leader in the church, but how many leaders in how many churches have been convicted of being pedophiles, literally molesting children in their congregation that they groomed from a young age? Like, oh, so obviously that means you're associated with them since you're a part of that church. So you're a pedophile too, by association.
Yeah, obviously.
Like,
yeah,
he's just going to ignore all that.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, like, it's so frustrating too because you can't have an honest conversation about the like litany of non sequitur arguments that he's been dishing out. I don't think any of these would land with him or make him understand. Like, he would just be like, well, I'm not those people. And it's like, yes, and we're not those people. So it doesn't, but that's what the whole thing has always been like, this whole battle.
Dude, it's
advocacy.
It's unreal.
It's real fun.
People like Frank and Sean and others, like apologetic types, they don't have any interest for what's actually true. They don't care about data, statistics, science. They don't care about any of that. All they care about is their own agenda, their own narrative, their own propaganda. And they'll manipulate whatever they have to manipulate to convince you that they're right and everybody else is wrong. And it's fucking bananas, man.
Oh, and I also just remembered the party who has advocated for child marriage to not become illegal in every fucking state has always been conservative Christian people.
Yes.
So Frank, if those are your people, then that must mean that's the natural conclusion of your belief system, right? That's the way you're gonna go, obviously, since people like you are doing that.
Correa brought that up earlier. It's like 42 states still allow for child marriages.
Yeah.
And there's currently like conservative governing authority figures like trying to make it easier for that to happen in different states.
Wasn't there a clip that went viral of some dude being like, oh, well, yeah, she was 12, but they had a happy long marriage. They stayed together.
Yes.
It was like,
oh my God, that was fucking nuts.
Just because you successfully groomed a 12-year-old, that's not a win, my guy.
Yeah. And it's like, you're the one saying that she's happy.
Right.
Is she up here saying that she's happy? No. You're speaking for her? Okay. That doesn't mean jack shit.
Yeah.
How does she feel?
God.
Bring her up here. Why isn't she up here defending her child marriage or how she was,
Okay.
Yeah, you won't hear her talk about it because she's not fucking allowed.
Right. Oh yeah. Okay. I see courageous things. Shouldn't talk about that in chat. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Where we at? Fatal flaw number 4. We only have 2 more clips.
Let's do it. Hit us with it.
This one's a minute long. The next one's a minute long.
I'm gonna mute my mic so I don't
wrap things up.
Let's move to flaw number 4. You say sex, and it's in quotation marks, is not assigned at birth.
Yeah, that's one reason they try and say that they try and affirm that this gender is completely fluid and it's wrong to identify young people one sex or another. But we all know this is nonsense. When a baby's born, sex isn't assigned. Sex is discovered. And sometimes it's discovered before birth. In fact, most people know what they're going to have before birth. And so it's not like the doctor just arbitrarily goes, well, this is a girl. No, they know it's a girl. They know it's a boy. And yet some people will try and say that the intersex situation, which is a very rare occurrence where people are born with ambiguous genitalia, is somehow an argument for transgenderism. It's not, because
All right. It's very rare.
My God.
So you can
It's about the
you can just
same
ignore
amount
that.
as, yeah, it's about the same percentage of population as trans people. So like, if you're going to say this exception's okay, but this other one, like, I would agree that these are both exceptions, and that, like we've talked about earlier, that the majority of people do align with their sex assigned at birth. And like, yeah, no, it's not completely arbitrary, but it is incomplete data because they go off of one particular feature, like with regard to anatomy. They don't do a full investigation of all of the components of your biological sex. So they are making an assumption based on certain criteria that they see. And most of the time that's going to be correct. And we don't deny that. We don't deny that the majority of people are going to have an accurate prediction based on their sex assigned at birth. But like, again, there are exceptions. And like he's saying, like that, yeah, there are some intersex people that don't fit that. And likewise, there are trans people that don't fit that. These are equally exceptions, and you can't accept one exception and not the other.
Yeah. This is something that's super triggering to me. And somebody did it on this week's episode of Transatlantic too, when we are talking about whether or not his definition of sex is valid, right? That's why he's bringing this up, to say that my definition of sex, where sex is this fixed thing that is discovered at birth that cannot be changed. That's what he is talking about. And when trans people point out that you don't, well, for true, like Ben just pointed out, for most people, that'll probably be an accurate observation. Sex identification can be wrong, and it does. He brought up that it's rare that people are intersex, and that was what I was trying to get to. That's triggering to me, because we're fucking talking about the edge cases that undermine your definition. And yes, being intersex is one of them. So we're pointing out that it's not even trans people who undermine your definition of sex. It's other people unrelated to trans people who undermine your definition of sex. Your definition of sex is so broken that it doesn't just, it's not just undermined by trans people's existence, which is what you're reacting to. It's undermined by other people as well. Your definition of sex is incomplete and inaccurate. That's what we're trying to point out. Yeah.
Hang on. So Greater Candle, it's funny that you say that. I was just I've been reading a lot of the like Gnostic Gospels and writings of the early church fathers lately. And there's a gospel called the Gospel of Barnabas. Stick with me. I'm going somewhere with this. It's a gospel that almost made it into the New Testament. Like, it almost made the cut. It's like the most insanely anti-Jewish gospel. It was produced in the 2nd century, shortly after John and Revelation and Luke, or in Acts. Anyway, so the whole premise of the Gospel of Barnabas is that the Jews got it wrong. When it comes to dietary restrictions, the Jews didn't understand them. There's a symbolic meaning behind them, so God abandoned them because they didn't understand them. So God, chose the Christians over the Jews. And he was like, what the Jews didn't understand. Hang on, going somewhere with this. Promise. He's like, what the Jews didn't understand is when it came to the dietary restrictions were symbolic. So when it's like, don't eat rabbits, because at the time they believed that rabbits developed a new reproductive hole, literally a hole every year. That was the explanation as to why rabbits could have babies so frequently, because every year they developed a new hole. Hold on. Do not, again, you're also not allowed to eat hyenas. That's what that falls in the line of the Old Testament dietary restrictions. What the Gospel of Barnabas says is no. What that means is you're not supposed to be sexually promiscuous with your gender identity, because they believed at the time that hyenas changed their gender every year. Because so a male hyena would come back next year and be a female hyena. They believe they change genders every year. The reason that is because the genitalia for hyenas is very hard to tell the difference between. So they would like in the 2,000 years ago, they would watch these hyenas, these like scientist type thinking people would watch these hyenas, and then they come back next year and be like, that's the same hyena, but he's on top now. He must have changed his gender. Oh, hyenas change gender every year. Don't do that. So yeah, like that type of idea, that type of thinking was absolutely there at that time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Does
I
that,
mean,
does that even make sense?
No, it does, because I mean, I'm aware that like female hyenas are like super dominant or something like that, and they have like enlarged clitorises.
Sorry, I'm a little sauced, so I don't know if that was super coherent.
No. It makes sense that people back then were able to observe that gender and sex didn't work the way it did in humans and other animals, and have thoughts about how that interfaces with themselves. But no, I hadn't actually heard about this. So that was a book that was almost in the Old Testament or the New Testament or what?
Yeah, the Gospel of Barnabas. It's we have a few different like this is a whole thing I could talk for hours about. But throughout the 2nd to 3rd century to 4th century, we have like a bunch of different proposed lists of books that should be included in the New Testament. One of our earliest lists includes the Gospel of Barnabas. There's the Muratorian fragment, which I think includes the Apocalypse of Peter and the Shepherd of Hermes. Anyway, yeah, we have a bunch of lists. All let's say between the 2nd and 4th century, we have like a bunch of lists of people who are like, this should be the New Testament. This should be the New Testament. No, this should be the New Testament. No, this should be the New Testament. So, but our earliest account suggests that, yeah, this book, the Gospel of Barnabas, should be included in it.
Okay, interesting.
But ultimately didn't make it. Hold on. I'll have to look into that, Jimothy.
Epistle of Barnabas.
Yeah, there's a difference between the Epistle of Barnabas and the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay.
So maybe you're right. I might be getting my stuff mixed up, but yeah, that topic was bananas back then. We'll just say. Anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, I wanted to say that he was saying that like trans activists, I guess, say it's wrong to notice that sex is assigned at birth. And no, I don't think any trans people are saying it's wrong to notice that sex is assigned at birth. I don't think it's wrong if a doctor goes, yep, it's got a cock, like ships it off to like the whatever, the baby factory room where they have all the babies.
The nursery?
Yes.
Yeah. That one.
The NICU.
Yeah, nobody thinks it's wrong to sex a baby. Like, obviously that's going to happen, and it's going to be right most of the time. Like, it's ridiculous. Nobody thinks that.
And it's nuts to say that because as soon as you were born, this one doctor said, this is your gender. That's your entire life now. Doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter how you feel. This doctor, as soon as you were born, said this, and that's what you have to go with now. Like, that's fucking stupid.
Which is the whole point of it. Matters if there are edge cases, and it matters if sex identification can be wrong. Which he wants to say, it doesn't matter that there are edge cases. It doesn't matter that it can be wrong. It's right most of the time, and therefore we should act like it's right 100% of the time. And that's what trans people are objecting to. But he wants to frame it like we're just mad that he's doing it. That doctors are doing it in general, which is just not the case.
Right. And this goes into the whole misogyny thing, because like all of this matters to their point of view, because if sex is immutable and we assert that you can't change if you're male or female, and men were designed to be leaders and superior and dominant, and women were just inherently meant to be submissive and quiet and have this role where you're unintelligent and you don't matter, they can more easily say that because, well, I'm the right person to say it because, well, this was like they want to say it's assigned at birth, but actually like God gave me this inherent ability to be better than you. And you can't do anything about the fact that you're not as good as me. And they can keep perpetuating this bullshit because they just believe that they are entitled to that status in society. And something that like the transgender movement is doing to these people and why they're so bothered by it is because it is shattering that assumption that they should be entitled to this position in society just because they are who they are. And we're challenging that, and we should.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
So this is our last clip from the show.
Fatal flaw number 5. Give it to us.
50 seconds.
Okay.
And then here we go. This is a fun one.
There is no basis for transgender rights.
Yeah, the question is where do rights come from? They don't come from your government, because if they came from your government, that would mean they weren't really rights, they were preferences. Because if your government changed and decided to take these so-called rights away from you, then they wouldn't be rights anymore. No, a right is something you have regardless of what someone else says about it. So if your government decides you no longer have the right to free speech, do you still have the right to free speech? No, you still do. Your government just doesn't recognize it. No, rights only come from God. And as our Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created and endowed by their government, no, endowed by their creator, certain inalienable rights. You see, if God doesn't exist, there are no rights.
And there it is.
Didn't he just cite a government document though? Like as his evidence. So he's saying that government doesn't give you rights, it's all based on God, but then my evidence is this government document that says this thing. So hold on.
Yeah, that's completely ignoring, what the people who wrote that might have meant by God in that situation. But like also the whole point of this whole thing is such a fucking like red herring. That might not be the right word I'm trying to use for what I'm saying.
Real quick, let me point this out so I can get rid of this window.
Okay.
Because in the description of this video, Sean says that Frank uses sound reason and evidence, not religion, to show that virtually everyone's, except he used religion in this. If you're going to say that rights only come from God, that's using religion. That's not using science and logic and evidence and reason. You're fucking using your religion.
And none of this was sound either. They claim it was sound reasoning.
Yeah, my big issue is like, okay, I don't really, if you think rights actually come from God and it's just about whether the governments recognize them, I don't care. That's fine. You can think that. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I'm advocating for trans rights, I'm not talking about your weirdo fucking magical essence of rights that God fucking gives you or whatever. I'm talking about the ones the government gives me. I don't care what rights you think God gives you. But governments confer rights upon people, right? The government has changed their mind and removed rights from people. That's just a fact. Women had the right to have full autonomy over their bodies, and now they no longer have that right in every state. Rights were conferred upon to women, and then were taken away from women. God was no fucking part of that. Every part of that was the government, was human beings. Even if I say, fine, you can have your weird definition, I'm not talking about that definition. I'm talking about the one that you clearly know I'm talking about because you brought it up in your point, in your argument. I'm talking about the arguments that the government confers upon me. I don't care if your fucking God confers upon me transgender rights, because that means nothing to me. I don't believe in your God. I care if my government has conferred rights to me, saying that I deserve to be protected from discrimination when I'm out at businesses, when I'm applying for housing, when I'm applying for education, when I'm getting a job. I want the government to confer those rights to me because that's what actually fucking affects me, Frank, not the ones that your God allegedly confirms to me, because I haven't seen any evidence of that, but I see lots of evidence of the government fucking giving and taking away rights all the fucking time.
Yeah, exactly right. That's my favorite. Like the most bizarre thing about that argument that our moral standard comes from God is like, you don't get to tell me that my morality comes from your God.
Yeah.
You don't get to say that. You don't
Right.
get to say that my rights come from your God. That's dumb as shit.
It's like a bait and switch because
Yeah, it's
you're
gaslighting.
talking about something that's completely different than what I'm talking about. If you want to
Yeah.
talk about the weird magical rights that you think your God gives you, that's fine. We can have that conversation, but that's not what trans people are talking about when trans people are advocating for our rights. And if you want to do the little bait and switch and be like, oh, well, there are no trans rights because we don't have this, they don't exist in this one that I'm talking about. I don't care about the one you're talking about. I'm talking about this one over here.
All it is they want to take the attention off of you and put it on themselves. That's all it is. Like, oh, you have this issue. Oh my God. Like, no, everybody look at me, listen to me, pay attention to me. Like that's all fucking is. Guys like Frank Turek and Sean, they're fucking attention whores. That's all they are.
It's like if I was like I wanted my grocery store to carry apples, right? I demand my apples at the grocery store. And Frank goes, well, there's no such thing actually as apples at the grocery store because apples are delivered from God. And he pulls an orange off of like the tree in his backyard. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. So it's irrelevant to the point that I'm making. If you want to actually talk about what I'm talking about, we can have a back and forth. But if you just want to take what I'm saying and then make it something totally different, you don't understand how conversations or like progressing concepts works at all. Rah, rage.
Dr. Ben, you look like you have something you want to say.
No.
All he wants to say is that the alcohol is now getting to the point where it's making him sleepy.
No. I was just like, I probably needed more to watch some of those clips. But
dude.
Yeah, no, that whole video just hurt. It hurt a lot. And like again, I said this before, but it absolutely bothers me that someone like him who has no knowledge, no expertise in any of this, no experience with any of it, just because he's a pastor, like he gets to be put on this on the same level as experts in the field. Like it's bugs me so much that like people who legitimately study this have put decades of work into it, and people's lives who are at stake here from the decisions made based on these years of study. And then someone like him is just like, yeah, well, but I'm a pastor. I'm the expert in every field ever. And you should run all of your decisions by me first before you look to those experts. Like as if your theology degree or whatever Frank's degree is in is like gives you enough knowledge to even comprehend the slightest bit of information about the subjects. Like that is mind-blowing to me. Yeah,
hell yeah.
Like the Dunning-Kruger of it all is astounding. Like that, and the thing is, like, why they can get away with it is because they have no responsibility for the things that they say or the things that they do. And it's like, if I, as a physician, everything that I say, I am 100% accountable for. And if I go before a court because I committed malpractice, like the most infamous thing that is done for doctors in court, like that title that you have of doctor, they will shove that in your face as a sign that, well, doctor, you should have known better because you have this title, you have this authority and this credibility. You should have done better. And so we're going to hold you to this standard. But people who are a pastor, like if they say the same things and they cause people to be harmed and they go in front of a court, it's like, well, but I just didn't know any better. And like, so they can say that. They don't have to own up to any of their decisions because, well, I just didn't know. I'm not an expert. Okay, well, if you're not willing to take accountability for all of that, then don't make the fucking claim. Don't get involved. Don't claim the authority. Like, you cannot honestly have one without the other. And that's what absolutely pisses me off about people like Frank.
Yeah. I feel like
That was awesome. Somebody clip that.
yeah, people who are pastors like Frank, I feel like have been doing the Joe Rogan grift since before Joe Rogan came around, and now
shit.
it's just they're hitting the YouTube scene, right? And now they're just bringing what they've already been doing to the internet. Is like it's nothing new, really. I mean, I know countless comparisons have been made to the anti-trans movement, from the anti-trans movement to the anti-gay movement, you know, from like the 70s and 80s and 90s. But it's worth acknowledging repeatedly because all of the same exact things that we have worked through with gay and bisexual and lesbian people are those same arguments are now being applied to trans people. And they seem to be capturing such a significant portion of society. I mean, even people who I think I respect intellectually are buying into these propaganda statements about trans people that are divorced from the empirical evidence. I mean, Richard Dawkins is the greatest example of this.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
so divorced from the evidence on this topic, but for some reason feels the need to talk about. I mean, he's read Abigail Schreier's book, which the whole basis of that book is a paper which has been thoroughly discredited, retracted by the paper that published it, the group that published it. Like, it's shocking to me that this thinking has captured so many people.
Yeah.
Even this
The
new
Young
sweetheart
Turks.
in the atheist movement,
That's another one.
who's been at a few conventions, Alice Gretchen. I met her and thought she was really sweet. And then she posts this thing about how she's coming out in support of J.K. Rowling because she thinks all the same things as J.K. Rowling, who thinks that people like me are predators and should be banned from the bathroom. Like, this is crazy shit, and it's capturing so many bright, wonderful people. And I think it's important that people actually are forced. I don't do coddling. I don't do the street epistemology. Let me hold your hand and walk you so nicely through the debate thing. Fuck that. No, my life is on the line. I have one life to live, and I don't get to spend it doing any of the things I want or like. I get to spend it. Well, I like you, Ricky, and I like being here and doing this kind of stuff. I don't want to have to defend myself all the time. That's bullshit, and it's stupid, but I have to because of those kinds of people who give these propaganda movements, they give it like energy, you know? They give it fuel. They make it a thing. And it's those kinds of people who are sometimes more damaging than the absolute worst, because most of us, I think, can look at Frank Turek and be like, wow, this dude's a fucking lunatic. And he's clearly just a religious bigot asshole and doesn't know what he's talking about. But when Richard Dawkins does it, when Alice Gretchen does it, when all of these other atheist people who we, you know, in our community prop up as like respectable intellectual people do it, suddenly it gets considered seriously by our community. And suddenly our community is not safe for Ben and I to go to every convention at, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's, I don't know, it's very frustrating, but thank you. I mean, the big motivating factor for me is that I see other people doing it and doing it badly. I'm like, nope, I gotta say something because that is not right.
Oh yeah, no, that's the same. That's the same here. It's like, I'd rather Arden and me be in the room than some people that don't know how to argue this effectively.
Yeah. And to create a saying, was it Alice or someone she was with? No, it was Alice. We were Oh,
you got an intruder.
What up? With food. Hi. Yeah, if you want to set it like up there or something, I'll get you in a minute.
Surprise appearance by Matt.
Oh, you're very sweet.
Matt, I didn't invite you for a reason. Go away.
Ricky says he didn't invite you for a reason. Do you need to go away?
I'm leaving.
Yeah, get out of here. Yeah, no, it was frustrating because I was actually at this like event with Dave Warnock, and she was there. She was really sweet to me, and we had a good conversation. And then the next day, I see her post this stuff, and I'm like, oh, cool. So the whole time I was there, you could have talked to me. We could have had a conversation and come to some sort of understanding. But instead, you chose to be fake and then to spread propaganda. Like, awesome. It feels so good to know you think those things about me.
Yeah, so I mean, along with that, like there are a few people in the atheist space that do stuff like that, and like call them the fuck out. Like people who are cis in the audience watching, like our allies, like we appreciate you. Like if you see people doing like that, like call them out on it. Like don't let them be comfortable in saying that. Don't let them like be part of this community as a whole and get away with stuff like that. We got to hold our own group accountable too. And it's frustrating to see people that will say like really transphobic things and then see that they're followed by people that I respect and stuff. It's like, so I try to call them out and say like, hey, if you're following this person, maybe don't. But like, if you see that, like bring it up, because they should have to face the consequences of their actions.
100.
Yeah, that's what. Have you all been keeping up with what's going on with like the Young Turks lately?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Unfortunately.
That's what's nuts. Like I followed the Young Turks for a long time, and suddenly they're like transgender athletes. Like, how many people does that represent in the trans community? That's such a small fraction, but you're choosing this to be your focal point, and that does nothing but damage every trans person.
Yeah,
but it's like, why would you pick that? Why is that your thing?
Views. It gets views.
Yeah, views. Like you're being paid. You're making money off this shit. This doesn't affect you. You don't give a shit. Keep pretending
they don't care the people that they're affecting by that. Like as they make money, they get their views, they get their algorithm boosted on the like throwing trans people under the bus, and like they don't face the consequences of what they're doing to trans people. Like there is blood on their hands, like all these people.
And when they do face
they don't have to face it.
They play the victim.
Yes, exactly.
Like, oh, this community just can't handle the blowback. No, you chose this issue to hang your hat on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I mean, I haven't commented much on the whole Anna Kasparian thing because to me, it's just, I think with a lot of this stuff, it's hard because we live in a culture where calling it out on social media, like when I was saying earlier, I think we need to address these things. I mean, more in situations like this where we're actually actively having a conversation. But it's so common to just talk about it, or to everyone has to like dunk and go in, and then that gives them more clicks and engagement. And it's like, we have to break the cycle somewhere, and I don't know where exactly it is, but yeah, it's frustrating. I see Craig just said, where did she say that? And Matt said it was on Twitter. She did post it on Twitter. It was also on her Instagram a while back. I think it was around like March or April or something, or February maybe. I don't remember when we were at that thing, but yeah. Good. Leave Twitter. Fuck Twitter. Fuck Elon Musk. I don't want to give more money to what's his name, Zuck, but Threads is lit, and I don't see Nazis every day. So
yeah, it's like a lesser of two evils type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like sorry, Elon, Zuck is fucking demolishing your ass right now. It's just what it is.
She zucked on my thread till I made a mess.
Yeah, it's crazy the number of people that are like the Young Turks, like J.K. Rowling, like Joe Rogan, like all these people just like hanging their hat on this issue.
Yeah,
it's nuts. Like this is such a small like issue. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't affect you.
Yeah,
what affects you is the economy. What affects you is inflation. What affects you is minimum wage. What affects you is healthcare, infrastructure. That's the shit that affects you. This
you're bringing up like
trans people existing. That doesn't affect you. Why are you choosing this? Sorry.
Yeah, no, don't apologize. And like you were bringing up like NATO and Ukraine earlier, right? Like there's so many things that deserve our attention. We have climate change to be concerned about. We have global scale conflicts going on to be concerned about with like very big military powers. And like, as you pointed out, like all of those political issues matter infinitely more to the average person than anything a trans person does. But for some reason, we're the ones on the news.
Yeah.
Trans healthcare is so thoroughly supported by the evidence, and many commonplace procedures are not. But what's the one you hear about on the news all the time? Trans people. This is a hate panic movement, just like the anti-gay movement, like satanic panic and all of that shit. It's the exact same thing. It's convenient politically to have a villain, and it gets views and it gets people out to the polls. That's why people do this stuff. And trans people the whole while are suffering, and our lives were getting better as the evidence was improving and healthcare was improving. And now a lot of our lives are getting immensely worse in certain places because of this stuff. Countless people today, real live breathing people, many of them children's lives are significantly worse because of these people. It's despicable, and every one of them should be deeply ashamed. And I don't know, the most we can do is this stuff, I guess, and debunk people's claims and hope that it reaches some people. But I don't know, it feels like the solution's going to have to be a lot bigger and more systemic, but I don't know if it's going to happen until we reach some sort of critical mass or something. But you know, it's hard to know. I can't see the future, and it's so hard. The politics changes so radically every day in this country. Like, it's really hard to know where things are going to go.
Well, whatever happens, I think we're on the right side of history.
I think so too.
As you know, I spent 13 years in the military. I fought in Iraq. I'm a patriot. I love our country because I think it stands for freedom. And that freedom belongs to you guys just as much as it does to me. If you're trans, do you like that? That's the point of this country. Be trans. I don't give a shit. It doesn't affect me.
Yeah,
you're gonna be my friend. I'm gonna hang out with you. I'm gonna love you either way. I don't care. Like, I don't understand like people, especially like on the left, who like suddenly are like, you know what? I think I'm gonna hate on trans people today. I don't get it. So just, you know, I know this country has a lot of criticisms that it well deserves, but yeah, I don't know. That I wish people would just shut the fuck up, mind their own goddamn business, and let people live their life the way they want.
Hell yeah.
It really is that simple to me.
Me too.
I don't understand.
I don't care if you think I'm a man or whatever. Just let me live my life and don't take away my access to healthcare. Like, it's that simple. Like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, that's all I want.
Yeah, you can still have your religious views and choose to disagree or whatever. You can do that for yourself. Like, you don't need to get in my business. Like, if you that's the way you want to live your life, okay. But like, stay out of my life about it.
Yeah, you don't like trans people, don't be trans. Don't transition.
It
Leave me alone.
really is that simple.
Yeah.
It really is. Just go live your straight life. And
I was just gonna say thanks, Ricky, for having Ben and I on to do this, because I mean, it's like, it is frustrating, you know, seeing the atheist community waver like this, and it's nice to have a platform to be able to come on here and to talk about trans issues and to hopefully reach some people in the atheist community who are watching and, you know, maybe affect someone in some way. But
I appreciate that. I really do. I'm glad y'all enjoyed yourselves. And thank you again for coming on. I'm going to wrap things up because I am passing out and I have to pee really bad.
No problem.
I got to get that food Matt just brought me.
Yeah, right. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks again, you guys. Everybody watching, if you're still hanging around, thank you in the chat for sticking with us all this time and dealing with their frustration. That is Frank Turek's dumbass apologetics. Anyway, follow the guests. Follow my guests. They're in the description. All the links. Go click on them. Follow, like, subscribe. All that bullshit. I don't even know.
Do it.
But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate y'all. All right.
Thanks.
So with that, as I close out, here's a friendly reminder that I have no idea how to end my shows.